All right. Wow, this is a small audience tonight. What is going on? It's obviously not putting enough interesting stuff on our agendas. I will call the meeting to order. Um, we are actually coming out of an in-camera meeting, so we'll just start off as the open portion of the meeting is reconvening here. First, want to acknowledge that we're on the lands in which we're gathering are the traditional territories of the coast and Straits Salish people, and specifically the Lekwungen speaking people, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections to these lands continue to this day. I also want to just make note that these chambers are a respectful workplace. Please note all here that we are recording this. They're live streamed and recorded for archive on the municipal website, so all comments will be recorded. So item number 2, we have our minutes and reports, and first up we have an amended minutes from the November 13th public hearing.
Move
These
the
are-
amended agenda.
Second.
We don't usually move it. Oh, do we have? We don't have to move the agenda.
Your worship, you don't have to move the agenda.
Okay,
Just-
move the minutes.
So minutes number 1, the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you, Andrew, or Councillor Appleton. Any further discussion on those? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Number 3, council meeting of November 13th. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Nope. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Special council November 17th. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Number 5, committee of the whole meeting of November 19th.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you. Mayor's remarks. I'm striving for brevity on these. I will just say how much I was able to attend along with many members of council the light up last night, and I want to just thank the staff for getting that so well set up, and to the Business Improvement Association for all the work that they did to both pay for and to organize that event. So it was very well received. One of the busiest ones I've ever seen, actually. I thought it might be quite empty with the weather threats, but it was very, very well attended. We're going to go straight into the public participation period. This is an opportunity for the public to speak to council about any issues that they want to speak to. I invite anybody to come forward. If you are coming forward, just state your name, municipality, and then print your name on the sheet there maybe once you're done. You have to use the microphone beside you there. We haven't quite arranged our...
Oh, I'm going to go to this one. All right, we got
Yeah.
multiple
We do. That's why it
mics.
was bent over. We're trying to hide it.
Now, we were...
Can you just state your name and municipality for the record? Sorry.
Anthony Mears, South Oak Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Mears.
We rehearsed it 2 people away, but now we've got a third person. We haven't rehearsed it, so. I've been doing a renovation all day, and I just wrapped up, so this might be a little bit rambling, but it's good information. It's also timely because I see there's a new resolution I didn't see in the on the first agenda, but it's seen its own tonight. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you all. I haven't done that yet for your election. People don't understand how much time and preparation and expenses to get elected. And I know you're going to be facing a lot of no-win situations, which is the most difficult. As long as you keep the public interest include the public interest, and you'll be appreciated. I guarantee you that. Okay, so the first thing, I wasn't going to deal with this tonight, but I've got two issues. One is that I was reading through some heritage minutes, and I think it's the last heritage meeting. A staff member said that it's not the role of the commission to seek public input, but they just make recommendations to council. And I was wondering how that could be true. First of all, I don't think there's anything written about that reading your resolution, that there can't be public interest, but or there can be public interest, but there's also nothing to say there can't. And I do know that the Parks Board allows submissions and public input. So we seem to have a bit of a discrepancy here. I'm wondering if it's up to the chair to decide that, which I think that's not really something the chair should be doing. I think we should have some policy on that. The second thing I want to say, not the second issue, but another issue around that is that I've attended most advisory planning commission meetings, and at one regarding King George Terrace, there was no preliminary approval report provided to the commission. Had I been allowed to speak, which I asked several times for public input, and that was turned down, I would have told them that there had to be a preliminary approval report, and that should have been provided. It was full of recommendations and conditions, and that never got provided, and they made a recommendation. I don't know if it would come to council or not, but I would pointed that out, and it was provided to council. So that's something that you could maybe consider. The second issue I want to deal with is
I'm just going to remind you that there is a 3-minute limit.
Well, I know, but I think, if someone's going to tell you how to turn straw into gold, you shouldn't cut them off. This is information. It's not criticism. This is just information. It's good information.
You have time. I'm just
All
letting you know.
right, thank you. I'll cut my next one down. So at the commission and committee meetings, there's no reports provided. The odd report is provided, so I know there's a capacity to do that. In my experience, when I joined the social planning department in the city of Vancouver in the late 70s, I was on most council committees, and there's public input, but there's also all reports are provided to the public. Now, this may save a lot of time for staff because people show up here looking for reports, and if they were on the committee meetings, that would be very helpful. Also, I chaired a committee.
Mr. Mears, that is time, so I think we've got the point. And just so you know, I think there's some consideration of looking at the committee process.
Perhaps you can look into this because I think it's really important. It's not that difficult to put a report on, an agenda. We can put a report on an email. So I think we should do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to council? I can actually look at everybody and get their head shakes. That's great. Okay, with that, we'll wrap up this session here and move on to item number 8. And this is vehicle and equipment tender awards. And I believe we have Mr. Haran to speak to this item. And we have a detailed report in front of us, so perhaps we can.
Yes, thank you,
Just a
Chair.
quick
It'll actually be Mr. Brozick that will be doing the initial brief.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So we have vehicles for replacement. 2 mid-size crew cab pickups, 1 3/4-ton pickup, 4-wheel drive backhoe, a top dresser material handler, and a mid-sized vacuum street sweeper. So we put it out for tender. It was out for tender for 2 weeks. We got a number of bids back, and we're within the budget that we thought would come in, and we're recommending to go forward with the purchase of these vehicles as it fills the strategic impact of supporting the protection and maintenance and development of infrastructure.
Thank you, Ms. Bursett. That was short. I appreciate that. Is there any questions related to this report? Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I may have missed it in the report. Is there any indication of the effect on greenhouse gases and the environment related to this report, please?
No, there isn't, but we took it into account with some of our vehicles. So the 2 mid-size crew cab pickups, they're a smaller size than that we're replacing with than the existing vehicles. So the existing vehicles, one is a half-ton, the other one is a 3/4-ton. So we're reducing it to a smaller mid-size pickup. As well, the 3/4-ton crew cab pickup, that's better fuel-efficient vehicle than the one that we're replacing. When it comes to the backhoe is a heavy-duty digging machine. There's not much that we can do about fuel efficiencies when it comes to that machine. And the mid-size vacuum street sweeper is a smaller size street sweeper than our previous one as well. It's a 4.1 cubic meter street sweeper, smaller in size. It helps with the turning radiuses within the community, that sort of thing, and is better in fuel efficiency. Yeah.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you for the report. Just for clarification on the bid prices received versus the capital budget estimates, are the comparisons equivalent in both of these? Because I noticed one said net of GST rebate and trade-in values. So is that the way the comparison has been done consistently?
Yes, that's the way we do the comparisons, and then we add on also any extras that we need to purchase, say racks, warranties, things like that.
So the total variance in is 106,000, but they're apple-to-apple comparisons.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite.
I'm sorry, I can't get into my iPad, but I'm going to go off memory. Some of your vehicles are well below what you had budgeted for. I think, for example, one of the trucks was, oh, thank you, it's right here. The trucks were 71,000, and I think you'd budgeted 90,000 for them. Is that correct? Or I'm just wondering what happens to the excess if it's taken up with other things that you have to buy for that vehicle. Yeah. So, for example, the two mid-side crew cab pickups, we're going to pay $71,865, but the capital budget was $96,000. So I'm just wondering what happens to that $27,000.
Mr. Brozak.
Most of it will actually go back into the equipment pool, but we do have to add crew boxes, headache racks, a light package for visibility. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, thank you for the report. Much appreciated. Just a general question, and you don't have to answer it tonight, obviously, but are we thinking about, as a municipality, about the future in terms of electric vehicles for public works, fire, and police, where we have vehicle replacement strategies? Only because I know the province has announced that by 2040, no fossil fuel vehicles will be sold in British Columbia. That's my understanding. So do we have something that we're sort of thinking about along those lines at some point? And that isn't, as I say, that's not for tonight, but just something that maybe we want to be thinking about and be aware of. And it speaks to Councillor Zelka's question around GHGs and that kind of thing, and climate change as well. Thank you.
You don't need to answer the question, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to, staff.
We did look into a smaller electric truck, but it's they're not at a level right now where we would want to purchase one. They don't have the life that we need on a daily basis out in the field, or the power, especially when you get into the larger machines like backhoes or street sweepers or things like that.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation here. Looking for a motion from.
The recommendation?
You want to do them all at once? Comfortable with that? Okay, so move them all.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. We are now on to the wireless service agreement. And this is a recommendation from the Deputy Director of Financial Services. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. So our current 3-year wireless agreement, it expires in February, and it's with TELUS Mobility. We have found out through that the province has awarded TELUS Mobility their contract, and so they've gone through the vetted process and the proper procurement process, and their contract, sort of say it's still our contract, but it's the same pricing that we'll get. We're part of the member of the Greater Victoria Joint Purchasing Group, and through that we know that the Capital Regional District, the North Cowichan, and the Saanich Police, they've all joined this contract rates, and we evaluated the proposal, and we came out with an estimated 2.1 reduction in annual operating costs that it will give the district. One of the key components that why we would like to join this, keep with TELUS Mobility and join the provincial tender pricing, because it's very competitive because they have a lot of volume and they can leverage that purchasing power, but also B, the agreement, what we want to do is avoid service interruptions. So if we were to go out to tender and award it to another carrier, there could be service interruptions between changing the phones. There could be, if we can't keep our same, we want to keep our same telephone number. That's really important. And we want to avoid the interruptions and that we would get between, because we have over 133 devices, and you can imagine how long it takes to transfer it over from the old carrier to the new carrier. But it's certainly a good financial gain at 2.1%.
Thank you. I have Councillor Patterson and Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, just when you mentioned there about the difficulty if you contemplated having another provider, it almost inferred that in a way we are held hostage to a certain degree to one carrier because of the complications of moving the service should we want to. And not that I'm in a disagreement that we should maybe consider going to another supplier, but it's just it does raise the question: are we somewhat held hostage going this route?
Through you, Chair. Actually, no, we can certainly go out. However, we are joining a tender award that has, with the provincial government, they have quite a large volume. So we pretty confident we're going to get the best pricing. And so we're very happy with TELUS Mobility currently and their service. So we just, staff wanted to recommend that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I hope staff will be patient with me in my former work as a telecommunications engineer, and in a former ministry that I worked with, the BC government. I actually did I became familiar with the Telecommunications Services Master Agreement, which I believe is the one you may be referring to, the provincial agreement that handles, that basically was awarded to TELUS. So with respect to that sort of background, if I may, through the chair, I wanted to ask specific to this contract. I noticed some of the ministries, some of the ways that they were able to achieve some efficiencies was by working with TELUS to, for example, with the data plan. They would pool it into one big data plan. I mean, in a family situation, you would call it like family pooling. As opposed to each individual person having their own, so 2 gig or whatever, 3 gig, and then all this extra memory not used, say, by our CAO, and then our director of corporate planning goes way over budget, so it's like, and we had to pay for him, but we could have somehow done it over there. These are hypotheticals, of course. So I just wanted to ask, with respect to what might be possible, are we doing a sort of a pooled approach in terms of some of the options that I know are available through that TELUS agreement, or is each employee, with respect, I'm just using data as an example, or minutes, or is each bill being sort of handled independently?
I believe we're charged individually. However, I think we're on a pooled data plan. And so that was one of the things that TELUS Mobility, they actually reviewed our current usage, and they adjusted some of our features to give us the optimum price, which is part and parcel of the 2.1%. But I think we are on a total data plan.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased to hear that. I know this agreement with that the province did do a fair bit of work with TELUS, that we are essentially riding on those coattails. It does provide a fair bit of flexibility. I'm pleased to hear that you're taking advantage of all that TELUS is offering. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, staff? Then I'm looking for a motion.
The recommendation?
Moved and seconded. And is there any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Next up, we have the thank you. Always wait for Mr. Brenton to come in. The next up on the agenda is the 2019 Oak Bay Police Department provisional budget. Chief Constable's coming in now. And I'll just ask Mr. Brenton if he could just give a very brief overview of the budget. Have a seat. Nope. Well, whatever you're comfortable with, but just have a seat as we get used to our new system, coming in and out. So yes, welcome, Mr. Brenton.
Thank you. Good evening. So just for the new councillors on members of the council, the BC Police Act requires that we prepare a police budget each year. It goes to our police board for approval, and then we're required to bring it before council before the end of November for your information, your acceptance. I won't necessarily say that you approve it, but you receive it, although we are looking for approval. But then what will happen is it will then form part of the overall provisional budget for the municipality, and during the estimates part of the process later in the spring, there may be some fine-tuning, I suppose. However, if there is any request on the part of the council for modifications, it would then have to go back through the board, through the police board. At the end of the day, and this is not something that I'm going to suggest would happen, but if there was ever a dispute between the police board and the council, then police services, which is part of the province, would be the mediator in that. But that's not something that you hear of happening very often, if ever. So getting to the budget, you'll see on, I believe I hope you've had a chance to look at the report. You will see a 5.01% increase. Now, I should just say as a caveat that we are currently in bargaining. So these are based on the pay rates from the current pay rates, which really are 2015 pay rates. So there is bargaining. It's a retroactive thing. Our contract, or the police contract's been expired for 3 years now, or coming up on 3 years. So anything that could be impacted by salaries or benefits, that type of thing, there will be a change at the end of the day. But it's really hard for me to speak about what that could be. So we do generally speak in terms of what the operating budget at the current pay rates. So this 5.01% increase is without any pending pay increases. That's okay. And just for your information, the municipality does, they deal with the 3 bargaining units within the municipality in a similar way, in which there are contingencies that are maintained in anticipation of potential increases, but we don't speak about them in the budget until we actually know conclusively what they're going to be. So I can tell you that in the 4 years I've been here, or I guess this would be my 4th budget, generally we are around 1% increase, but there are 4 fairly significant areas that are the drivers behind this increase. For the majority of the budget, we've been able to either hold the line or make some decreases in some areas, some small increases in other areas. But there are 4 primary areas that are driving this increase. And if you go to page 5 of my report, I don't know how it's numbered in your package. This would be the final area where it refers to financial impact. So the 4 key drivers of this is the employer health tax, as I assume that you're probably aware of, which is close to 80,000. So that would represent almost a 1.1 3/4% increase right there. our dispatch service. Now, you may recall, I believe it was 2 years ago, the idea, the fact that we were going to be going to Ecom as our dispatch provider, dispatch 911 provider for the CRD. So there had been 3 dispatch centers within the CRD, police dispatch centers, Victoria, Saanich, and West Shore RCMP. So there was a decision by those 3 dispatch centers to consolidate, and Oak Bay and Central Saanich really had to follow course, and Ecom will be the service provider. So the increase is related to the Ecom taking over the center and running the center. There's a new building currently under construction. It's actually at the point where it's being outfitted. The go live date is anticipated to be around the 1st of February 2019. So I don't know if you. I'll cover the other 2 areas, and then I can come back for any. I'm sure there may be some questions around that. The emergency response team, the Greater Victoria Emergency Response Team, is an integrated unit within the CRD, or within the municipal police agencies in the CRD. These are all, with the exclusion of one person, these are people who have sort of day jobs, but in the case where there needs to be a highly tactical response to things, high risk type things, then they are the people who are called out. And there's been a move in Canada to increase their training levels quite significantly, and the Victoria-based unit is following that course. So much of the costs associated with this is due to the increase in the training standard. And then the final one is, traditionally we've always, when we buy a vehicle, we also have a fairly substantial outfitting aspect to it, the emergency equipment, various things like that. Historically, we've always kept the vehicle purchase in capital, but the outfitting aspect of it within our operating budget, which probably isn't really the way to do it. So we're combining it. So there's a $30,000 increase to our capital reserve contribution for vehicle replacement, but the purpose of that is to pay for outfitting of the vehicle. I indicated we are making some capital purchases. They are listed in a report, but what I wanted to do was to show where they were funded. And out of the $184,000 in capital purchases, $7,100 of that is from taxes. The balance is from reserves that currently exist. So if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Britton, Chief Constable. Is there any questions? Yes, Councillor Patterson, then Zelka, then Braithwaite. Okay.
Just a question on the Greater Victoria Emergency Response Team.
Yes.
I guess I tend to think of those as somewhat as our answer to the SWAT teams that we see quite often in the news media for other centers. I'm just trying to understand, I guess, so we have staff that are trained and they will respond if the request came from other divisions. I'm having a difficulty, understanding how this might relate to Oak Bay specific. The costs are really starting to increase, and I understand where across Canada, because of activities that are taking place, there's a strong desire to beef up the reserves. Fortunately, we don't have some of those same problems here in Oak Bay. But if there's a momentum to always keep up with what's happening in perhaps even larger centers of Canada, the cost impact for a small community can be substantial. So I'm just wondering if there are any comments on perhaps the benefits to our staff and the training, and how we will interact with other members that are trained to respond to incidents that happen in the Greater Victoria area.
So it may be helpful, Mr. Brenton, to just explain a little bit about how this works, about how our staff are seconded to these groups and how they're funded and how they work together? Because we don't directly control that, but it is part of the regional thing that we contribute to.
Sure. So there's various integrated units. Some of them are actually full-time positions. In some cases, they're actually funded externally, such as the traffic safety units and that sort of thing. This unit and others, none of the members on them are full-time, except for in this case, the person who oversees the whole program. So we actually don't have a member on the emergency response team right now. We do have a couple members on the crowd management unit, which is the riot squad for layman's terms. And we probably won't be putting anybody on right now if someone was to apply because of this training requirement, because we would lose that person so basically a week a month. There are some long-term solutions that are being looked at in the region around that, but that aside, so yeah, there's an overall cost. All the integrated units, there's a joint management team that are made up of all of the deputies in the region who oversee these integrated units. Every early fall, a budget is put together and approved by this sort of subcommittee, I'll call it, and then they bring it to the area chiefs, and we ultimately approve the budget or send it back for more work and that sort of thing. So the numbers that are here. And they're in the report among other integrated units as well. Are really numbers. Of course, you have your subject matter experts, the people who are in the units who are bringing, this is what we want, and then you have sort of your reality check of, okay, this is what you're going to get. But there are definitely sort of standards that we do have to meet. And you're right. It's something that Oak Bay, with any luck, won't have to utilize, but unfortunately it's an expensive insurance policy, because if there was a large-scale event, I won't get into, you can just imagine different potential events, we have to have the ability to respond, and our way to respond is through the development of this integrated team, and that would be the same for now. The RCMP jurisdictions in the CRD, there is an RCMP emergency response team. So if Highlands had an incident, that's who would respond, and they do pay for that through the RCMP contract. That's part of what's included in it. But this is how the municipal police agencies maintain that capacity. And quite frankly, I don't know if the province would allow a police agency not to have access to that level of response.
Thank you. And I will say, because it was brought up at the discussion at the police board meeting on the budget, there was some that requirement, essentially requirement for the extra training, was brought up as a question mark, and how applicable is it, and those questions. But at this point, that's the governance model being used is following that guideline.
Yes.
Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Chief, for allowing us to query you on this dance that we have, where it's arm's length, but at the same time we get to at least ask how you're spending your money. So I really very much appreciate this opportunity to ask you these questions through the Chair. I have at least 3 queries, possibly 4. The first relating to finances. I must admit, your excellent report, when I first saw the first line, I nearly fell off my chair with the 5%. However, it looks to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the 5% increase in the operating fund is really more of a gross a number with respect to the total. However, when everything's factored in with respect to the reserve funds and adjusting things, it sounds to me on the last page that really this report is only suggesting the only, shall we say, hit or the only increase in actual tax, the tax draw, is approximately $7,000. Is this true?
No, I should clarify that. So if you look at the, on that section under the financial impact, there's a little bit of a table, I guess for lack of a better term, where it speaks to operating fund and capital purchases. So those are two different areas of the budget. So the 5%, 5.01% increase is truly an increase to the operating fund. Capital purchases are a separate area. So when I describe down below, that's just the funding of the capital.
Thank you very much for clarifying that for me. I much appreciate that. So it's you are basically proposing, absent knowledge of any increase in union wage increases, absent knowledge of that, this is proposing a 5% increase on the taxes, or excuse me, the budget, 5% plus an extra $7,000 increase.
That's correct.
Whatever that turns out to be in terms of the budget.
Yes.
Excellent. So related to that then, I do recall, and maybe also for the benefit of some of the newer councillors around the table, that approximately a year ago you presented a fascinating table that was comparing the cost of policing across the CRD. And I recall that the number in the Victoria, for the Victoria Police Department, was in the $400 and so many dollars per person per
Right.
capita.
Yes.
But our rate was in the 200 and something rate. Do you happen to remember what those numbers were?
Just off the top of my head, Oak Bay is around $260 dollars per household, I believe it is, or capita. I can't remember but you're right. The Victoria is in the 440 range. I would say Saanich would be low 300s, but Oak Bay, you're correct. Oak Bay is generally the lowest in the province.
Well, I definitely wanted to give you the opportunity to toot your own horn, because you're doing a great job there. Please, through the chair, keep it up. Thank you very much. I would definitely appreciate the wonderful value that the service offers to our residents. That's my first question. The second question has to do with, if I may, through the chair, has to do with e-com dispatch service. I understand the process about the three centers consolidating into one. I also understand that there's a parallel process going on with respect to fire dispatch. And then, of course, we also have that CREST system. And it seems that e-com name comes up in all three of those areas. I know all three are independent and they're separate, and yet in many ways they're related. So I'm not sure how to ask this question, but please bear with me. With respect to fire dispatch, I know you're not an expert on this, but I reading in the paper, I know that some of the Victoria area fire dispatch cities, towns, went to e-com on the mainland as a way of lowering their dispatch costs. So we now, from the fire perspective, seem to have like half of it in the mainland and half of it on the island. And Chief Cockle, I'm sure, is going to be working that one through at some point. And I'm sure we'll find a dollar figure coming forward with respect to that. I know e-com, with respect to the police dispatch, is essentially being contracted to come in to do this setup and do this work. Can you please explain to me why it's going to cost so much money for us? With respect, I think, what is it, 100 and, I'm trying to remember the exact figure you mentioned here.
And I'll keep this question restricted to the police.
We will keep it restricted to police, I know, but I'm just, e-com's all over the place, and they
yes.
touch our aspects here.
Chief Princeton, can you just give a quick
$122,000 increase. If you could speak to that, is this a one-time cost? Is this a year-over-year cost that's being proposed?
I guess I have to go back to our service agreement with Saanich, and to be frank, I don't know when we first undertook that agreement, if there was really a very complex funding formula assigned to that. There was an agreement. How that was arrived at, was that a realistic figure? I would suggest it might have been a low figure. In reality, to what the true costs are to run a dispatch center. So the cost that we're at now is based on a dispatch center that meets, again, I'm always going back to those standards, which I quite frankly, I can't sort of source that. But in today's expectations around a dispatch center, the overall cost and resourcing levels, equipment levels, and that sort of thing do arrive at a certain figure. Without going into the report, I believe it's around $8 million a year to operate a dispatch center that provides 24/7 coverage to this large of a geographic area, this many communities. And just for information, Duncan and Lake Cowichan, Mill Bay are into that as well, and it's an economy of scale. So there's a funding formula based on call levels, 911 calls, population, that type of thing. And this is where Oak Bay's portion of that comes to. Now, there is and I know there's going to be a question about. There's two aspects this year because there's a transition cost of which our portion is. Excuse me, I'll have to find that here. No, it's around, I believe it's 16,000. Yeah, 60. So that's a one-time transition fee, but the 122,000 a year ongoing will be what the annual cost would be. Now, of course, that's going to change with pay increases and different, that sort of thing. But yeah, so that's really the best response I can give you.
Thank you.
To that.
And you had another question?
I did have one last question, and thank you very much. I much appreciate the information here. Last question has to do with vehicle replacements. I understand the report implies that there's 2 vehicles that will be purchased in this next fiscal?
That's correct.
So with respect to those vehicles, we heard pretty extensively from the Superintendent of Public Works how, a backhoe is probably not an appropriate vehicle for an electric, a battery charged vehicle. However, as I've discovered, having owned an electric vehicle now for the last 2 years and paid next to no fuel costs for it and the incredible torque and power, I would be very I have to wonder out loud, and I'd love your opinion on this, if one or both of those new vehicles could be electric, with respect also to the environmental aspect.
Sure.
Chief Brenton?
Sure. So one of them is going to be your traditional marked patrol car, which the electric cars, one that would meet the standards that we need as far as the handling package and the volume and capacity and that sort of thing would be a very expensive vehicle. So at this point, we go to the traditional gas-powered vehicles for our marked patrol cars. The second vehicle is going to be more of a unmarked admin multi-purpose vehicle, and we're replacing a hybrid now, and we'll likely replace it with another hybrid. We had planned on replacing the marked vehicle. That was the plan. But the other vehicle, the hybrid, is getting to an age where the battery pack needs to be replaced, and we're told it's about a $5,000 replacement of a vehicle that's probably worth about $7,000 right now. So we hadn't replaced the vehicle 2 years ago. We skipped 1 year, so that's why we sort of want to get back on track of that annual replacement of one vehicle. But to answer your question about the electrical vehicles, I don't think we're in a place yet for marked patrol vehicles that we're there. We're probably getting close to like we had looked at, it would have to be something like there's hybrid full-size SUVs, but they're $80,000 where we can get a vehicle for half that price. And because of the geographic area that we're in, the amount of fuel that we actually burn is relatively low compared to some jurisdictions. But I'm hoping, as things progress in technology, that we may be there someday.
Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you. I just want to go back to, you answered one of my questions already, so thank you. I just want to go back to a point that Councillor Zelka brought up, which was your 5.101% increase on your operating funds. But that, just to clarify, that is really on our overall budget for the municipality. That's only about $250,000, so just about a 1% increase on our municipal taxes, 1.25%. Yes?
I would have to turn to my expert
Yes.
here.
Okay.
Through you, Chair, yes. So a 1%, 1% of our taxes is about $223,000.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I just have another comment other than thank you very much for your comprehensive report. It's interesting to me when I saw the number for the new employee health tax for your small department to be $80,000. We obviously the fire department, that'll be the same, and then I'm looking at staff for this because when we look at what it's going to cost for the rest of the municipal staff, that's going to be astronomical. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the bottom line of our budget. That was just a comment, but thank you very much for your report.
Yeah, you don't have to comment on that. Yeah, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you. Your report is so full of interesting information, begs many questions. But I do have one that certainly I've heard quite a bit about from residents in the community, and that is the speed of vehicles in Oak Bay. And I noticed there is on this listing new equipment, an in-car radar unit. And I'm just wondering if perhaps the chief would like to elaborate on the benefits of the new equipment, perhaps in curbing some of the problems that we are seeming to experience in the community with traffic speeds.
Sure. Chief Brendan.
Okay, so there's generally there's what we call stationary radar, where the person's pulled over on the side of the road, hiding behind the billboard, like on TV. But there's also the moving radar, which what that will do is it'll allow we have one vehicle that has it in it now. This will allow us to have it in two vehicles, and we generally always have a minimum, two vehicles on the road at pretty much any given time. So now, as a police officer is going, from A to B to a call or to go do an inquiry on an ongoing matter, they're going to be able to actually detect speeders coming towards them. So not only will it be where the police officer has said, I'm going to dedicate the next, half an hour to speed enforcement, there will also be those sort of opportunity to give tickets out, we'll put it that way. Just happen by someone, approaching them from the front. So it just adds to the efficiency, and I would hope, an increase in the amount of enforcement that's going on.
Thank you. And you did a cost analysis that is cheaper than buying more billboards? Okay. Councillor Green.
Through you, Chair, and thank you, Chief, for a very comprehensive report, as Councillor Braithwaite said. And just to follow on Councillor Patterson's comments on speeding, it is a huge issue in Oak Bay, and I think we all know this. So I'm very pleased that you're going to have equipment that can detect oncoming speeders. Is there a plan to increase that technology over time so that ultimately every vehicle would have that technology? Thank you.
Yeah, ideally, it would be great to have one in every car, but it's sort of a one unit at a time process.
Thank you.
Councillor Braithwaite.
Can I make my motion now?
You
Yes.
can make a motion.
Thank
Yes.
you. I move that we approve the 2019 police provisional budget.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Councillor Zelka.
Sorry, I did have one more question through you related to the internet question. It's sort of almost. I've had all these other questions, but I don't quite understand. The internet is beyond capacity, and upgrades were found to be problematic. Is this like a Commodore 64 or something?
It's
if you could just help me understand what this means.
So this is our intranet. So it's our internal system. And this is the system that we use for all our scheduling, retention of. It's a database. It's really an integral part of how we run organization administratively. And the one that the system we have now was brought in about probably 8 years ago at a cost of about $1,500. The person who created it is not available anymore. We have two people who administer it as far as managing it, and it's become a real problem. Now, the $30,000 we did reach out to a provider that provides a similar service for a number of other police agencies to sort of get a placekeeper, like an idea of what it could cost. But our goal will be to do a request for proposal process to try to determine, truly identify what we need, and then also a more competitive price, I would hope.
Thank you. I appreciate that input. If I recall, maybe it was 4 or 8 years ago, there was some work was done with the Saanich Police Department. I don't know whether Saanich at one point was actually doing email for Oak Bay Police, or whether, but maybe they still are. But whether something could be done with a nearby police force.
They're also in the process of replacing their intranet system. So I could see at the very best, or potential would be, again, through economy of scale, if between the two, like we don't want them linked, but we may be able to create a scenario where if theirs would be, a little bit bigger capacity than ours, and we might be able to get a better price that way. But that's something we want to work on.
Any other discussion? None. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed.
Thank you.
We now have a set of 2 minutes in front of us. First is the Oak Bay Advisory Design Panel minutes.
Move approval.
Moved and seconded. Do I have a seconder? Yes. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And Oak Bay Heritage Commission minutes, October 9th.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. We have no correspondence, so new business and verbal reports. Is there any new business? All right. Report on the Capital Regional District. Really nothing at this point. There's orientation going on actively. Everybody's getting up to speed, but the meetings start in earnest coming up shortly, but not yet. Any other? Well, I guess I should have under new business it's after this. Any other verbal reports that people want to bring forward? Okay. Love that. All right, here we go. We're last one is the resolutions. This is my resolution. I actually had a conversation with staff about this, and after some discussion, there was a recommendation made to kind of be a little less prescriptive. You're trying to solve the problem with the resolution, and more of identifying the problem and asking for some help to bring back some ideas. So I have a slightly modified version of this, if that's okay with people, done here. Do you have the motion in front of you there? So the first part of it stays the same. Therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to bring back to council suggested changes to the procedures bylaw. But then after that, it just says, and the public hearing process. And what that would allow it to happen is just, there's a number of changes that staff have been looking at for the procedures bylaw, recognizing that there's improvements that can be made to the public hearing process, some of which might be part of that procedures bylaw, but some that might not. And so this just gives a bit more leeway and for the best recommendations to come back to this body. Councillor Braithwaite?
I'm just wondering if that's the case, then perhaps we could include in that procedures bylaw timing of meetings, etc., which is something that I gave a notice of motion for that last council meeting. So perhaps that could be included in there instead of coming back with the motion.
Ms. Rella?
Absolutely, Your Worship. Staff anticipate that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Green?
Thank you, through you, Chair, to staff. This is great, and I'm very happy with the changes that you've made so far. Thank you very much, you and Mayor Murdoch. I just had a question. Someone answered it earlier, but I just wondered if I could ask you to address it perhaps in this report when you come back. It would be very helpful to have the agenda as we have it, with all the attachments available for the audience to see them as we see them on these screens. And I just wondered, my understanding is the technology isn't quite there yet, but is that something that we could work towards? And it's just a suggestion, but I think it would be very helpful for the audience during meetings. Thank you.
Ms. Rella?
Thank you, Your Worship. That is something staff could look into. There'll likely be a cost to it, but it's certainly a solution that council may want to consider moving forward, even as part of the public engagement lens.
Thank you. And I think there's no harm, frankly, in any member of council, if they have some thoughts or ideas, to just go to staff and bring it up. Because what's going to come back to this council will be sort of a list of options and some recommendations from staff, and then council will, in a committee of the whole, sort of sit down and go through those and see what we see is a fit. So if you have some thoughts, then please do bring those forward to staff prior to that. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the fact that you generalized it to give the staff an opportunity to have a bit more elbow room to come forward with additional aspects. So are you looking for someone to move this?
The motion would be, so as I just read it out, do you want me to read it again, just so
Yes,
we're clear?
please.
Okay, so the motion would be, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to bring back to council suggested changes to the procedure bylaw and the public hearing process.
I'd like to move that motion, please.
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Councillor Zelka.
Thank you. And with this motion being as general as it is, I know during the election a number of discussions were made with respect to transparency. A lot of reference was made to the mayor's task force on citizens engagement with respect to many of those recommendations that came forward. Some of them that potentially could actually, no doubt, touch upon the procedures bylaw. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing and seeing what staff brings back with all of the ideas that are floating out there relating to this. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. And I believe that brings us to the end of the meeting.
Move it. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? You sure? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, staff, for the new clock at the back. That's cool.
That's your fire chief, actually, that did that, just so you know.
That's because he didn't want it to fall on my head again.
It is firmly attached to the wall.